Hi guys, I am tuning in here to share a couple of my cooking problems that I have had over the past couple days and just trying to learn from here because that's what I do. I try to figure out what I'm supposed to be learning from the problems that I have in life. So story one, I called it the beer bread, right? Okay, so I was going to, Walmart, they had this great idea that they would make this frozen bread, and all I have to do is thaw it out and let it rise and then bake it, and it's like almost like I made real bread, right? But I really didn't. I just took it out of the freezer. But so you have to thaw this bread out for 4 to 7 hours, let it rise, and then you bake it. And voila, right? You got a homemade bread. But so I took this bread out the other night. It was in the evening. And I'm like, oh, it'll be ready to bake here by the time I go to bed. But by the time I went to bed, it was like only halfway rise. So it wasn't ready. So I was like, oh, it'll be fine. Like when I wake up in the morning, it'll be ready to put in the oven, right? Well, wrong. I got up and this bread was like rised up to the ceiling because, we all know about yeast, and yeast doesn't quit working. It just keeps doing what it does. And so this bread was huge, and I'm like, oh no, what am I gonna do? Should I didn't want to throw it away, and I'm like, well, I'm just gonna bake it. We're gonna see what happens, right? And then the bread comes out of the oven and it looks all funny and misshapen, and then I try a little piece and it tastes like beer. You could taste the yeast in this bread, like really bad. So that wasn't good. And then the second thing that happened yesterday, I am making these cookies, right? I'm making all these cookies for my friend's wedding, and I use the sugar cookie recipe that I've used for 100 years. Every Christmas I use the same recipe, and they always turn out. And sticking with what I know here, right? Because I don't have like a ton of kitchen knowledge by any means. So making these cookies, and I get my first batch out of the oven, and they're crosses, they're cross-shaped cookies that I cut out, and all the crosses are just melted together. They're they've just lost all form, right? Just a big blob of mess on the cookie tray. And I'm like, what? What just happened? What happened to these cookies, and why are they like this? Because, I'm on a time schedule here. Like, I have to make a lot of these, and how am I going to do this? Like, what happened, right? So I'm thinking, and I'm like, oh, I check the recipe. I'm like, maybe I forgot to put something in there, and I don't know what's wrong. So I just start over. I'm like, I'm just going to make another batch, even though I had like a whole bunch, because I like quadrupled the recipe. So I'm like, I have all this recipe, this whole batch that I'm going to have to throw away. I don't know what's wrong. So I start over with a whole new batch. I really carefully measure everything. I'm like, okay, I know that I did this correctly this time. And I put the cookies in, and lo and behold, the second batch all melted on the tray. Like, what is happening here? And it was already, like, I was in a funk because I just was dealing with a lot of personal struggles yesterday, and just, it wasn't good. It was not good that this was happening. I was like an hour behind at this point, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's wrong. I'm gonna have to just start. And I had bought all the ingredients at like a different store, so they were all different brands. So I'm like, I don't know which thing is causing the problem. It's one of the ingredients. And so the thing that made the most sense to me was the butter. I'm like, maybe it's because of the butter. So I switched it up. I happen to have other butter in my fridge, a different brand. And so I made a whole nother batch, started over again. And this time the cookies turned out just perfect. So I'm like, Well, it was the butter. I figured it out, you know. And so I'm reviewing my beer bread and my melted cross cookies, and because, you know, that's what I do and I can't sleep at night. And I'm like, okay, what can we learn from these problems that I've just experienced? And what I kind of came to, I think, is just that, you know, Jesus taught us about yeast, and he said that a little bit of yeast, it works through the whole batch. So we have to be really careful about that particular ingredient. You know, there's always going to be yeast among us, but we've got to be really, really careful, because that stuff can take over. It can take over, and before you know it, that yeast can cause a reaction. It's a catalyst. It can cause a reaction, and it can make things really, really big, really, really fast if we don't watch out for the yeast, right? We have got to watch the yeast. You know, we have to know that it's going to be there, and we have to plan accordingly. We can't just go to sleep all night and think the yeast is going to stop working, because it's not. It's just going to keep on working, keep on doing what yeast does. And so we have to be careful, to be extremely careful, knowing that yeast is going to be present in the church and within relationships. So that's lesson number 1. And lesson number 2 is, you know, sometimes we just have to start all over. Sometimes we just have to scratch, you know, even though we quadrupled the recipe, we've got, you know, only so much time. Sometimes you just can't salvage. You can't salvage that bread that has risen to the ceiling and tastes like beer now. Like, you can't feed that to your baby. Like, you can't do that. And same with the cookies. Like, even though you may have done everything right, like you measured correctly and you mixed correctly and you were careful to cut out correctly and you did all of that work and all of that effort, sometimes those cookies can't be salvaged because the ingredients that went into them weren't correct. The labels were correct, but the actual ingredients themselves, they were a different brand. And so, you know, God gave us, he defined things for us. You know, he defined for us what love is and what kindness looks like, and, you know, all of the virtues. He told us what they were. He told us what they look like. He told us how to exemplify them. And he not only told us, but he showed us. He demonstrated those ingredients for us. And he wants those particular ingredients in those ways put into our recipe. He wants that brand, okay? But there are other brands that we can buy, and they're a little bit cheaper. But in the long run, they're going to cause us so much heartache and so much problems if we just try to substitute one for the other. And even though they say they're the same, the end result is not the same. And we end up having to scratch the whole thing, and we're put behind a whole hour or longer. And then we just have to start all over. And so, you know, as long as our end result is what we set out for it to be, like with these cookies, like I figured it out. You know, I made it right. I started over twice, and the third batch ended up working out for me. But I think we have to strive to get that end result to be what it ought to be. We can't just settle for smushed cookies, right? Because we need the cross to look right. We need it to look as it should look if we're going to glorify God. You know, if we're going to make the bride happy, right? That's the goal. And that's my goal. So anyway, all that to say, God cares what brand, what ingredients we use when we're making when we're making way for Him, when we're making anything for Him, when we're doing anything for Him, when we're involved in anything for Him, we have to use His prescription, His recipe, His right ingredients. We can't substitute something that isn't quite right or isn't what He prescribed, or we're going to end up with a mess. And we're just going to have to start all over, and it's going to be a waste of time, a waste of energy, a waste of good ingredients that we mix together with that wrong ingredient, and it's just a mess. So all that to say, in my little learning lessons here in the kitchen, because I try to grow in the things that I'm not really too strong in, and the kitchen is not, I'm no Martha, so this isn't the place where I spend most of my time, but I do try to grow. And I don't know, I feel like God is teaching me through even the messed up stuff, even the messed up beer bread and the melted cross cookies. Like, God is showing me, He's showing me the difference of what He wants and what maybe we settle for sometimes. So anyway, that's all. I mean, I hope it's helpful for someone, my little stupid mistakes I always make in sharing them. So anyway, I hope you have a good day, and I hope that's helpful. See you later.